It is game week here on Talkin Beavers, and it is a familiar foe for Gary Anderson. How will he fare against Minnesota now that he's at the helm of Oregon State? And the Beavers found something special in Ryan Nall last season. How will he shape the offense? All that and more still ahead on Talkin Beavers. College football has finally arrived. We are just 2 days away from Oregon State taking on Minnesota to kick off the season. Welcome to Talkin Beavers. I'm your host, Amanda Maynard, alongside Lindsay Schnell, James Dockery, and Nigel Burton. And these two have quite the history. We were just talking about you.
I just met this dude yesterday.
You recruited him.
Yeah,
huh?
he did. He did.
He's a good salesman, right?
Yeah,
I guess.
Hey, everybody that knows Coach Burton knows he can get you to do some stuff. That's for sure.
You know what's funny was when I recruited Doc, or actually I didn't even go to Doc's high school for Doc. I was actually looking at another kid. And so I went out there to go, look at this other guy, and I was like, he's okay. I don't want him. But there's this dude who's a sophomore who is a guy. I'm going back to go see him and get a little golf in because he lived out in Palm Desert.
Oh, so that was the real reason.
But no,
right?
I mean, no, he was awesome to watch. Had a passion for the game, and to see him go on and play in the NFL, it's really cool. So
he got an eye for talent. I was about 6'2", $150. So I don't know what he saw in there. Those ball skills kids practicing. For sure.
Well, guys, this is year 2 of Gary Anderson's rebuilding project. How will you define success? Aside from wins or losses, or you can say it only comes down to wins or losses.
Well, look, I think that it's too early to be defined by wins and losses because I don't see more than 2 or 3 wins on the schedule this year. But I think that if they can play with passion, I think that was lost the last few years of the Riley era. Guys just didn't look excited to be there a lot of the time. And there were moments last year, the Civil War gave me a lot of hope and optimism going in. I do think that the Ducks were kind of caught, thinking they would just roll over the Beavers, but you got to give Oregon State credit for playing with heart. And I think gave those kids a glimpse at, hey, if we listen, we can win, we can compete.
Yeah, I think the best coaches I've been around personally are coaches that teach us to take it one game at a time. So as a player, I don't think that they need to necessarily worry about wins and losses right now. We take it one game at a time and just compete. Too many times last year when I went to the games in the fourth quarter, the game just felt way out of hand. I think this year we want to be able to go into the fourth quarter with a chance to win the game. Give our offense or our defense one stop or one possession and go down there and put us in a chance to win the game.
I think the biggest thing is if this is truly starting to become Gary Anderson's program, his players, what you're going to look for is improvement throughout the season. So if you go back to the beginning of last year, you got Weber State, great win, San Jose State, another solid program that has bowl history, has been in bowls, had some success. Came back, beat them. Then Michigan starts off well, and then all of a sudden things start to come unraveled. But as the season wore on, game after game after game, we don't even want to talk about UW. We don't want to talk about UCLA. Until you got to the Civil War, you didn't see them improve. They actually got worse. So as this season goes, maybe wins and losses, Lindsay, aren't the way that you really, that's not the thing that you're going to gauge, but you have to see improvement from the beginning of the season to the end, and that way you can springboard you into the next year. But I'm not ready to give things away just yet. I think there's some stuff that's winnable, and nobody goes in and locks those helmets up talking about maybe we can beat Minnesota. They're going to go in there and try to get it done.
Well, if you listen to the rhetoric, they certainly seem like a very confident bunch. Lindsay, you had the chance to sit down with Gary Anderson to see just how year 2 is different for him.
Things are a lot different year 2. Just the relationships with the kids, understanding where they're at. You have some major goals on the field. You have some major goals academically. But overall, I guess the easiest way for me to put it is, I know we're in a big boy fight. I know we're in a tremendous, tremendous challenge, but I love it.
Throughout your career, how do you think as a head coach especially you've defined and measured success? Because if you get caught up in wins and losses, that can go down a very dark road.
Yeah, there's no question. And for me, I think a lot of coaches do really care about that win and loss record. And to me, what matters is the kids. And I always gauge myself and, quite frankly, assistant coaches on the relationships of the kids that you have that have left your program and the relationship with the kids that have had a hard time in your program. It matters to me a lot. That's the way Coach Mack taught me many, many years ago. So I think it's a good spot that we're in again. I feel we're comfortable with that.
So now that you've been here a year and you know the community well and the athletic department well, there's something brewing here that's good. You look at the success of wrestling, the men's basketball team getting back in the tournament, the women going to the Final Four. Can you learn something from them? Have you learned something from those teams, those coaches, those players?
I have learned exactly, when I say I've learned from them as a whole, every one of those teams has a core identity back to Oregon. Every one of those teams has a core identity to tie themselves into exactly what we are. You know, if you don't want to be involved in the community, if you don't want people to know who you are, if you don't want to be intertwined between the student body and the student athlete, and the community and the student athlete, man, you're barking up the wrong tree. There's a lot of special things here. There's some special teams, and I think there's some special coaches.
So this might be a little bit of a controversial statement, but there are some who say that this was a pretty bleak roster when he took over. Gary Anderson obviously has a proven track record of being a solid rebuilder. How long will this process take?
Okay, first of all, I do not think that it was a weak roster. I think the talent was down, but I think that more than anything, they were built for a completely different system. And they didn't, you know, when you come in, you don't have time to recruit a whole new class. I think it's going to take some time because, look, the Pac-12 is good. The Pac-12 has a lot of good coaches. Think about how much better Colorado is since McIntyre took over, and they're still the bottom of the North, the bottom of the conference. But I said it last week, and I thought it again when I was at Gary Anderson's presser this week. Every time I'm around him, I'm convinced he's the right guy. He'll fix it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Lindsay. Last year, I thought we did have some talent in the right positions. I think that we had some skilled players. I don't think that we had strong enough quarterback play, but we'll talk about that later. I think that most importantly, we had to get better in the trenches. And, you know, those people that know football know that you win games in the trenches. And I think that we're going to see a team that's a lot physically stronger. We always talk about Oregon State getting bigger and stronger in the offseason this year. And that's really a direct correlation to the trenches and dominating the run game and being able to stop the run.
Hey, look, I tried to wave the flag as much as I could. I tap danced as much. I bought 2 different pairs of shoes. But when it came down to it, I get a chance to watch Pac-12 football and go to Pac-12 camps all the time, coached in this conference, coached in the Mountain West, and that was not a Pac-12 football team when it comes to talent. It just wasn't. I mean, I think there were, whether you talk about the offensive line and their inability to move guys off the line of scrimmage, defensive line, how small they were. You go to, obviously, the quarterback situation was a mess. I mean, I remember going to practice and seeing them complete about 20% of their balls in a bubble drill, okay? I'm talking literally a guy just bubbling and balls going into the ground. I'm not kidding. So it was one of those things where, I mean, it was horrifying in terms of what did Gary have to work with. Now, granted, you know, you can say, well, maybe, you know, if Del Rio had stayed and what if Richard Mullaney had stayed, but sometimes those things are out of your control. I came to Portland State. I did everything I could to try to learn those kids and, hey, you know, we're going to start this thing new. And there's just some guys who are burnt out. Like, listen, I want to go do something else. I mean, literally, I was hanging on to people's legs trying to keep them in the building. Sometimes those things happen. And I think with Gary trying to change the entire attitude and chemistry of that football team, I think part of him was like, look, I'd like you to stay. The kid says he wants to leave, and you go, all right, well, bye, because I don't have time for this. You know, I'm trying to rebuild something. So, you know, the fact of the matter is, when they were starting football games in the fall, that was not a team that was designed to win. I don't care what system you were running.
And when we talk about talent, I think one of the things that made Coach Riley great and what he was known for is being able to do less with more, which personally makes me a little offended because I was one of those recruits. But I think that, again, it was just different styles of player. Coach Anderson, as he's mentioned all offseason, he's looking for a certain type of guy. And those of us who have hung around Coach, we know his mentality. He's a D-type personality, straight business. So he's finding more of those guys, and we're going to see them on the field.
See, we called it nuggets, man. We talk about turning over stones, diamonds in the rough.
Exactly.
Right. Diamonds. I'm reading too much ESPN stuff.
Exactly.
Dust you off a little bit.
Thank you. All right, still a lot more to get to. Don't forget to hop onto our Facebook page for all your latest Beavers news. Right now, you can get Dwight James's take on the Beavers pulling an upset on Thursday night in Minnesota. And later in the show, there's a new play caller for the Beavers. The crew weighs in on the impact. But first up, what will the D-line look like with Gary Anderson in charge? Welcome back. Coming up a little later in the show, the Beavers have made some moves at the coordinator position. What's that going to be like for the players? We will get Nigel and James's take. But now it is time for our LeSchwab Quick Fix. LeSchwab doing the right thing since 1952. And we're taking a look at Kyle Pecco's numbers from last season. The Beavers have to find a way to replace this defensive stud, now trying to make his way in the NFL. Certainly his explosiveness, his athleticism will be hard to replace. And now one of the biggest changes on the defense is Gary Anderson taking over the D-line coaching duties. Lindsay, how do you think that's going to affect what this D-line looks like?
So I'm actually interested to hear what Nigel thinks because
here's what I hear your take
you
first.
think?
Coaches, head coaches have so much to do that has nothing to do with X's and O's. You are in charge of so many things. You got to be out, you got to be fundraising, you got to be shaking hands, you got to be managing everyone. So how much more does this put on your plate to then take on a position? I mean, I think that it's great because one thing about Gary Anderson that if you watch practice ever that you'll know is really different from the Riley area. Riley kind of, you know, stood on the sideline, talked to guys. Gary is in the middle of it. He wants to be active, and I think as players love that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's just Coach's personality. He's a defensive type of guy. He's in your face, and as a DB, the D-line is our best friends. When I was in Carolina, I was fortunate to have one of the best pass rushers in the whole entire NFL, and I knew as a DB, I can sit there for 4 seconds and play this receiver tough because my D-line is going to get there. And with Coach Anderson going to the D-line, to me, that just shows that he really wants to put an emphasis on stopping the run and getting after the passer. If we can stop the run and get after the quarterback, we can win games.
Well, okay, so first of all, at least if we're talking about Gary, nobody knows that defense better than he does because it's his.
Right.
So the thing is that defensive line will be the most detailed. You won't see a whole lot of blown assignments because he will make sure that that will be the case. I think the other thing you'll see is they'll always have energy when they hit the field because they know the head coach's eyes are on me more than anybody out here. So there's no day that I can come out here and not really feel like doing it because they know every single play the head coach is looking at me, whereas the quarterbacks, every now and again, I can get away with something. Or the wide receivers or somebody else. I think the third thing is this will end up being the most talented group on the team for one reason.
Wow.
It will. Now, it may not be this year,
but
guarantee they will be because the head coach coaches them. And so the head coach has ultimate say over everybody, every recruit, and all those things. And I think a lot of players love the fact that they're going to be recruited by the big man, by the guy who makes all the shots and all those things. So eventually that will be the strength of the team. And just like James said, that's what you want. You know, in terms of your daily breakdown. I did this when I was at Portland State. I was the corners coach when I was at Portland State. Even when I was at the University of Nevada as a coordinator, I coached a position, and it helps you keep a pulse on the team for one, which is absolutely critical. If you're removed as the head football coach, that can really hurt you. And I think the other thing is that it's just one of those things where he understands that this has got to be a pivotal position for this team, and I salute him for it. I think it's going to be a great deal. He's got a GA that can help with all that everyday grunt work stuff. So. He can do the bigger picture thing.
Do you feel like, I mean, it's a little bit of a trust component to it that, again, this has got to be shored up and there's
like
nobody...
he has the lack of trust in the rest of the staff?
Well, that again, you're taking it over because...
No, I straight up asked. I asked him point blank, like, why'd you do it? And the way that the NCAA has college football set up is that you have an uneven number of coaches. You have to pick which side's going to have the most coaches. So he decided to shift his extra coach to the offensive side, and he basically picked up the slack on the defensive side. So if you break down every single staff in America, there's 5 on one side, 4 on the other. He decided to shift the 5th to offense, knowing that he could coach the D-line and have them looking the way they want. It wasn't a lack of trust. I think it's just wanting to have detail on the offensive side of the ball, which they struggled.
All right, moving to the secondary, very familiar. Of course, the Beavers allowed, on average, 250 yards in the air last season per game. Obviously, the Pac-12 has some powerhouse offenses. James, do you think this unit will be better this season?
I think so. I think you see Treston DeHue coming back in his second year. He's 6'3", 208 pounds. That's a corner for me to watch. I like Dwayne Williams as well. He's an athletic guy. His size will make him, I think, really valuable in the slot. I think Xavier Crawford is a longer type of traditional Oregon State corner that's beneficial for disrupting timing on the outside. So another year in this position, again, with Coach Anderson shoring up that front seven, allowing the play to be, a little bit shorter than normal. I think the corners will have some improved play.
Yeah, I think it's funny, that graphic, because the guy who's missing is Xavier Crawford, who they actually think might be the best of all of them. I mean, those safeties are what safeties should be. They're the guys that, in their opinion, are quarterbacks of the defense. They can get everybody lined up. They do everything they ask them to do. But obviously, it's a corner-heavy system, and they really feel like Xavier Crawford, like I said, might end up being better than every guy you saw on that graphic.
Okay, so 250 yards in the air per game is terrible. We can agree. But in the Pac-12, what is realistic for them. I mean, the Pac-12 is such a high-scoring, high-octane offenses. I remember last year, Kalani Sitake, who's now at BYU, saying, you're not holding teams to 3 points, 7 points. That's not a thing anymore in college football in general, and especially in this conference.
I mean, you ever worry about yards when I was coaching you?
No, I'm more so worried about touchdowns. You know, teams can drive and get all type of yards, but once they get from the 40-yard line going into the end zone, we call that the high red zone. That's the time as a DB you really got to lock up. You don't have to cover as much field. You have your eyes on your man a little bit more. You understand the red zone concepts, and you're allowed to play tighter. So, again, like Coach said, I don't think it's about the yards more than it's about touchdowns allowed.
All right, we're going to take a look at one of the plays from one of the key players in the secondary. In our standard TV and appliance play breakdown, standard TV and appliance setting the standard since 1947. And James, kind of break down this play for us.
Yeah, right here we have Treston Deku. He's in the corner. He's a nice long corner like I always love to talk about, 6'3". He's up there challenging the receiver. He's going to disrupt the timing. Right there, Treston Deku has his eyes on his man. He's in good position right here. This turns out to be a good play. However, it could have been a great play. Right here, as you can see, he's in great position, but he needs to attack the ball a little sooner. The receiver from Oregon does a great job of coming back to the ball before our corner, so he was able to kind of turn into the DB right there. If Treston uses his long athletic body and just high points that ball a little sooner and attacks it with a little bit more aggression, I think he turns into a good play, into a great play, and turns the ball over. And we all love turnovers as a DB.
That's spoken like a coach right
Yeah, exactly. Good work. Okay, so now we've addressed the D-line. We've talked about the secondary. Who do each of you guys see as the emerging star on defense this year?
I mean, defensively, the guy that I really like is Bright Ugwegbu. I mean, he's a guy, number 47. He's 6'1", 6'2", 225 pounds. He's long. He's sudden. He's all those things that, I mean, I go back to the Chaz Scotts and, you know, the Keith Ellisons. He's in that frame, and they've really seen a lot of change and maturity from him. I think he's a budding star.
Yeah, I really like Elu Idun. Sorry, man, if I messed up your name, but this guy is a massive human being, and I think for him to play the technique that he does at nose tackle, it's really going to help our defense with stopping the run. And if I can see a little bit more speed on passing downs, I don't know if he'll be in there for that necessarily, but again, on first and second down, he's a huge guy that will really help us in the run game.
Also listed at tight end, right, too? I believe.
Yes.
So who knows where we will see this guy.
Good shot. Good call.
I like Treston Deku, too. I think that he's got to make a big jump. He can now. I think he watches that game film, and he understands what he has to do differently this year. So he's got to make a big jump. But you know what? Everyone needs to improve, bottom line.
All right, the things that people really care about, locker rooms, that is coming up next. The team getting a pretty sweet surprise this week, moving into a new locker room. We'll give you a look, what it means for recruiting, too.
This is crazy, man. I feel blessed. I think it's outrageous. Excellent. Awesome.
I was a part of the whole locker room for 4 years, and to have a brand new locker room like this, I appreciate the old players that paved the way, and I appreciate all the donors and boosters who invested their time and money.
Man, this is crazy. You know, I've never seen this before. It's Christmas and summer. Ridiculous.
Shout out Beaver Nation, man. This is great. I'm blessed. Thank you very much. Hats off to you guys, everybody that made this possible, man.
All right, that moment brought to you by Comcast Business Class, built for service. Man, those players pretty pumped up about that. They moved in Wednesday night. Hydrotherapy pool's in there now, a sauna. Beavers are now going to run out of a tunnel under some sort of party deck, apparently. What kind of impact will this have on recruiting, Nigel?
I just wanted to see if you could say his last name.
We just avoid all those, right?
I called the spring game, and I was like, Gary, can you just recruit like one Jones?
Right?
Because I got Ugwebu, I've got Alon. I'm like, man, this is killing me. Anyway, you know, I was in the transition of this whole stadium. So I started in 2003. In 2005, they raised Reeser, did the whole other side of the half of the stadium. I think in 07 or 06 is when we did the big board. And so it changed everything in terms of recruiting. The kind of guys, you know, Coach Anderson on our show on Rip City Mornings came on, and he talked about, you know, you have guys who do the Northwest tour. They go see Oregon State, then they go up to Washington State. And the fact of the matter is, everybody likes stuff that's new and nice. You know, I don't care how much you want to say, hey, I just want to know about the coaching staff.
No.
You know, the fact of the matter is,
this matters to 17-year-olds.
Yeah, well, it matters to parents, you know, because, I mean, he's like, listen, I think his quote was, if you're choosing between a 1962 whatever or a brand new 911 Porsche, everybody's going to pick the Porsche. So you don't necessarily need a Porsche, but you at least need some version of sports car.
And the other thing is that I think that there are a lot of fair criticism, I think, of the Oregon State administration, athletic administration, and school administration that they were not investing in the football team, you know, the few good years they had. Sorry. Sorry.
You've been offended.
But this shows a commitment. You know, we've talked a lot about there's a lot of good energy around the entire athletic department now. You know, you look at the success of men's and women's basketball. Baseball obviously is still good. And now you have this locker room. You have fans excited. You know, this was in the works for a long time to get this money, and it's cool, and you see those kids' reactions, and it's all over Twitter. It's all over social media, and recruits pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah, I really appreciate, you know, Kendall Hill. I think that was in a video, you know, giving respect to the former players and coaches, everybody that contributed to building that locker room is very beautiful.
You were one of those guys, right?
One of those guys.
Your locker was this big.
Yeah, that was better than my locker in the NFL. I can't lie. That was great. But just to take you guys in my living room when I was getting recruited by Coach Burton and everybody else, as a player, I had offers, you know, a couple small offers for basketball, a lot of small mid-college offers for football, you know, and my mom was, the main thing was, hey, you're going to go to the Pac-12. Those are the universities with money. Those are the universities with education. And so that was a choice for me, like, okay, Oregon State, Pac-12 school, has more money than San Diego State. I'll probably lean this way, right? And so when these kids are going to different colleges, you can't be the school that looks like they don't have anything. You just, not in today's age. It's not about, well, we want to recruit certain type of guys. Yeah, that's true, but certain type of guys still want to have the luxuries of life when you're, you know, playing 40 hours of football, 20 hours of school, 60-hour grind. You need a cold tub that can fit all your friends.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate that.
Well, certainly summer is where a lot of the hard work is done. We caught up with some of the guys who told us what they worked on this summer.
The running we did this summer was, would say, ridiculous, but it's a method to Coach Simon's madness. So as a receiver, I just being in shape more, being able to run all day.
This offseason, we really just got after it on the field, in the weight room, running. You know, we really honed in on our skills and really being comfortable with one another.
This summer, I think I worked most on just ball skills. Okay. So being able to catch the ball, different angles, and just being able to be an athlete and making a play.
Just to be successful, you have to just surround yourself about football. Your life have to be football. So it's football every day. And today is football, tomorrow is football. So every day is just football, and that's what I focus on. And now I'm ready for the season approaching. Now I'm ready for it.
Okay, so across the board, who has made the biggest strides this summer, you think? Lindsay?
Okay, it has to be Victor Bolden, I think. You know, he goes from a great freshman year to he didn't do very much last year. I thought Doc made a great point last week about in Riley's offense, the small receiver always knew his role. But Gary Anderson talked this week about not only does the receiving core have to be big, but receivers got to catch contested balls. They were terrible at that last year, so Bolden has to step up.
Yeah, for me, I'm not so much about an individual player. I'm going to go with the whole Oregon State passing game. I think Daryl Garrettson, with the familiarity of the Utah State offense and how that may carry over to Corvallis, his chemistry in the offseason with the receivers, the reason why he was voted captain. I think him being a steady quarterback back there is going to improve the way we can call plays and the way we execute them.
What position is Gary Anderson going to coach? The D-line? They're going to be the best ones, I promise you. Because there's nobody you can point the finger to. You can't say, well, you know, we got to. That's your spot. Those guys are going to be the guys, no doubt, in terms of most improved in my mind.
All right, still a lot more to come. Time now for a break. Next up on the show, we are getting our guests' take on the new play caller for Oregon State. Stick around. Welcome back. And Beavers fans, we have got you covered for football season here on CSN Northwest. We're going to have 3 weekly Beaver shows plus a Sunday morning pregame show, game day, to get you ready each and every week. And guys, Gary Anderson has obviously had no problem making changes, big changes about, you know, when things haven't worked in year one, including the coordinators. You know, new co-offensive coordinators, Kevin McGivern and TJ Woods. McGivern now calling the plays. What sort of effect do you think that is going to have on this offense going forward?
So I was surprised when Gary did this after 1 year, just because it's like, gosh, you know, you got to learn new stuff. But Gary did say this week that one of the biggest things that he noticed at practice now is everyone's speaking the same language. So I'm not sure that it will be a big transition or has been a big transition for the kids. You know, dual coordinators sometimes can look weird. Gary made this comment at Media Day. Oh, well, some people think you got 2 coordinators. It means you got no coordinators. But we all know know that it's really titles are how you keep guys in town, give them raises, make them feel good, looks good on their resume. But look, I think that they're going to be a lot better on offense because of the quarterback situation. I'm not sure how much we will see a difference because of coordinators, but just having a guy that knows how to run the offense.
Yeah, I'm gonna rely on you on this one, Coach. I'm a defensive guy, so I'm not too sure how that's gonna, affect the team.
Well,
honestly.
yeah, you know what's funny is I've gotten a chance to really get to know these guys. It's funny. People sometimes will bring up, oh yeah, you played at Washington. I spend so much more time at Oregon State. I've kind of been adopted, so I appreciate that. So it's one of those things. In talking to a lot of people that were just around the program, I think it really came down to sometimes with the old coordinator with Coach Baldwin, there was a little bit of circular peg into square holes and kind of forcing the issue on some things that eventually led to some things not going the right way. And so I think Gary probably feels a little bit more comfortable with now, you've got Kevin, who also has rapport, having coached Darryl at Utah State through some really tough games and tough situations. I mean, their guy was Chucky Keaton, who's now on the staff there at Oregon State when they were at Utah State. He all of a sudden goes down. You got a freshman you're going to throw in against Boise State, one of the fiercest programs in the country, and Darryl was smooth as silk. He didn't get flustered, any of those different things. So to have a guy who can be in the ear of your quarterback, who has that trust that's built way before he even got here, I think is going to be huge for the development of that quarterback and for the offense.
And James, I mean, what does that familiarity do for a player? As you mentioned, again, being at Utah State with Darryl Garretson, I mean, how much would that help him?
I think it helps a lot because I'll just take it back to my moment when Coach Burton left our program for a great opportunity. And, we were sitting there in the room, we're like, okay, well, I'm used to Coach Burton, how he coaches me, so who's coming in here next? And we were fortunate enough to bring in Keith Hayward, who was a Oregon State corner, typical, to the build that we like. He actually ran the coverage and the technique that we were learning throughout our career, so it was an easier transition. So the fact that Darryl has a voice that he's heard before or is familiar with what he actually does, I think that goes a long way in calming him down.
You're still number one, Nigel.
Oh,
don't worry.
The story I got was like, yeah, man, I remember when, it was the spring and you left, Coach, and like all of a sudden I made a bad play, but I didn't hear anybody yelling at me. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Burton's gone.
All right, still a lot more to come on Talkin Beavers. We're going to take a closer look at the run game. What can we expect from Ryan Nall this season?
And Ryan Nall, good carry here.
Boy, Nall, I love that physical run. It's Nall. Boy, look at that power. Ryan Nall in a big hole. Can he go all the way?
The Beavers go quickly again. Second down to Nall. And Nall is in. Touchdown, Beavers!
And here's a look at Ryan Nall's numbers from last season. 455 yards, 3 touchdowns. Of course, fans best remember him for his performance in the Civil War game last year, where he ran for 174 yards, including a monster 66-yard touchdown. So, guys, is Nall the real deal for this team?
Ryan Nall, this should have been Sandy Pioneer. Yes, I think so. Last year you look at the stats and Seth Collins led them in rushing, right? Which is like, wow, we have a quarterback that leads us in rushing, and gosh, that's not very good. You can see both sides of the coin. Look, but he averaged 6.2 yards a carry. I mean, that's a man right there. Now, can he do the same thing? He caught a lot of people by surprise last year. He's not going to do that this year. He's got to have some other guys, that can come in and give a change of pace for him. But I think he looked bigger and stronger to me when we saw him at Media Day.
Yeah, I'm just looking at film, and as a DB, I played at 185. I'm just looking like that's your worst nightmare coming out there because Ryan Nall runs hard. When you average 6.2 yards a carry, that's obviously meaning that you're breaking through tackles, you're keeping your legs moving. And I just really love this guy. I love his attitude, love his work ethic. And, once he gets to that second level, it's going to be very, very difficult for DBs to bring down.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if people know, hey, you're not a surprise anymore when someone's stepping on your face. I mean, honestly, it's all irrelevant. I think the other thing that's special about him, even when going back to when he was at Central Catholic, I know, but he was at Central Catholic, was, I was actually the first guy to offer him because I coached his brother, Jake, at Portland State. And he was this close, by the way, to also being a Portland State Viking until Mike Riley offered him. I said, thanks, Rouse, I appreciate that. But, I mean, you saw his ability to accelerate. You saw he ran away from from guys who were also Division I recruits. So it became obvious to me. I mean, everybody was talking about you could be a DN, you could be a linebacker, you could be a tight end. And I'm like, no, you can be a running back legitimately at the Division I level. Luckily, and it was crazy that they kind of stumbled into it there at Oregon State as they got thinner. And you saw that in the Civil War. Not only do you see film of him running people over, but when he broke against Oregon, he ran away from all those 4- and 5-star DBs back there who have all that speed. So now he's actually prepared himself over the summer to be a running back, not an H-back like he went into the season last year. And yeah, I expect big things out of him.
And he's confident.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, just going in knowing exactly what his role is going to be. I mean, how much does that change?
It's huge. It's huge.
That's I mean, we talk about expectation, you talk about confidence, you know. You walk in now knowing that you belong, whereas last year I think he was probably always trying to prove it.
I mean, how do you even watch film when you're like, hey, I'm an H-back. No, wait, I'm a tight end. No, wait, I'm a running back. Wait, am I back to H-back? No, now I'm a... So now he knew all summer, he knew all offseason, like, this is what I am. Now I can start to work on honing my craft. And just knowing that alone is huge for him.
Yeah, some of the guys that I've seen play running back for Coach Anderson, whether it be at Utah State or Utah, big, physical, imposing running backs, and Ryan Nall's cut from that cloth. So it really wasn't surprising to me when I saw Ryan make that transition. But again, having a whole year of knowing your position is great, because now you know you have a purpose to wake up with, what you need as a running back, how you need to get better in the film room. It leaps and bounds on what it could do for you.
All right, speaking of Nall, time now for our Flat Tail Brewing Damn Good moment. Our Mike Parker catching up with the star running back earlier this week.
With running back Ryan Nall, and I emphasize running back because, Ryan, a year ago at this time there was a little bit of uncertainty about that. Tell me what it feels like to go into year 2. You're the guy. I mean, you're number 1 on the depth chart. You're the running back. What are your thoughts about the clarity of that role on the team this year?
It definitely feels good knowing where I'm going to be coming into the season. Last year, you know, I was still playing a little bit of age, some running back, and you know, this year I'm like you said, I'm the guy now in the starting position. So, you know, I've been in some big games before, so I know what to expect, and you know, I'm just ready to go. I'm just ready to get after it.
What did you do to train for the year that may have been a little bit different than in years past, where what are you going to be, a linebacker, you're going to be an H-back, but you're a running back? How did you work with Coach Simon to get ready for the year?
I'll say I ate less. You know, compared to the year before, you know, I was eating a lot more to bulk up to get up to 250. But then this year, you know, I got to more of maintain, shed a little bit. So, you know, I was eating less, eating right, and Coach Simon, you know, he has a wonderful program for, you know, all you know, athletes, to whether you want to gain weight, lose weight, whatever it may be. His program is designed to, you know, to do that. Whether you want to gain weight or lose weight, it can help in both.
Finally, you will lead a good core of running backs, but there's also a new guy at the controls at quarterback in Darryl Garrettson. So in terms of that, Ryan, what about Darryl as the leader of the offense and the confidence level you have in him?
I got a lot of confidence in Darryl. You know, he's been in big games before. He's played at the highest level, and I think he's ready to get after it as well, just as I am. And you know, I have full trust in him that he'll make the right call. You know, whatever it may be. If he calls audible, you know, I'm gonna trust him. You know, he's our quarterback, and you know, he leads the offense.
Ryan, thank you. Good luck in Minnesota.
Thank you.
That's Ryan Nall, and now back to you.
All right, Lindsay, obviously you've spent a lot of time down there. In what ways do you think Nall is better this season?
Well, what we were just talking about, confidence, you know, and we've talked about Darryl Garrettson, his ability to come in right away and build chemistry with everyone. He has that with Nall, too. That's huge. You know, they're going to have to check down the ball to him some. So I just think the confidence is the biggest thing. He can run with some moxie now. Everyone's talking about Royce Freeman down at Oregon, rightfully so, but I think Ryan Nall will demand a lot of attention.
I don't know if I want to put him in Royce Freeman's category.
I'm not putting him in Royce's category. I'm just saying you can't only talk about Royce.
I think Royce is the best running back in the country.
Right.
You know, McCaffrey's the best football player. I do.
Have you watched Dalvin Cook play?
I have. Yeah. Yes. Royce Freeman is the best running back in the country, hands down. I'll put him against anybody. Christian McCaffrey's the best football player in the country.
And Leonard Fournette is.
And Leonard Fournette looks really good with a beard. Anyway, the point being, when it comes down to it, you know, Ryan's got a way to go. But the thing that's special about him is now all those other skill sets that he had, playing H-back, playing tight end, understanding route combinations, understanding how to read defenses, catching the football out of the backfield when you have that kind of size. And that goes back to what Doc's talking about. As much as it's breaking the open field and running and things like that, it's also those swing passes, it's the check downs, it's the arrow routes, it's all those different things where now you're one-on-one with a defensive back, and that guy doesn't know, do I hit him high and get trucked, or do I try to cut him and he uses his athleticism and takes off on me? So, I mean, he's going to create a lot of issues for people this season, no doubt.
And again, I just think when you come to a training camp and you come to a season and you have that designated role as I'm a starter, you just carry yourself different. You walk to classes different, you eat different, you sleep different, the attention you get is different. It just brings that moxie out of you. So I'm expecting him to show that confidence and show that moxie out on the field.
All right, we are taking a timeout and we're getting to know the opponent. Coming up next, we'll take a closer look at Minnesota and what to watch for on Thursday. Time for our Toyota of Portland on Broadway tune-up, and we are getting ready for Minnesota, a team that Gary Anderson definitely knows pretty well. He is 2-0 against the Golden Gophers, beating them during his tenure at Wisconsin. Of course, it was a little easier to get there from Madison than Corvallis. And of course, the team left earlier today, so tonight and tomorrow, to finish up some things. But Nigel, what do you remember about making that trek, and how difficult are those games?
You just had to bring this up.
It's easy for the coach. They're not doing anything. It's the player.
We don't do anything. You know, what do I remember about? I remember having a rainstorm, and we actually had to, like, the game shut down at LSU, and watching people try to streak across the field. That's what I remember. No, I mean, the difficulty, especially when you're talking about time zones, is trying to get the kids acclimated. Now, luckily, this game is at 8 o'clock, and I believe they're on Central Time.
Yeah, so it'll feel like 6.
So it's 6, so that's not a big deal. The ones that are really tough is like when you guys played at Penn State. Right. That was a 12 o'clock start, which is really 9 o'clock to the kids out here. So those are rougher. But you know, sometimes it's all in the presentation. If you present it as, hey, here's a great opportunity for us to go out. Now, that being said, once again, you know, we had Coach Anderson on Rip City Mornings, and, you know, he is not a fan of this. I mean, he was point blank, and also knowing that looming in 2018 is Ohio State. Right. So there's 2 words I would say to all Beaver fans out there: buy out. So get out of that game, because it's not something that he's looking forward to, and I'm not sure the program's going to be ready for that just yet in 2018.
Yeah. I think from a player standpoint, it's just like Coach says, that clock, making sure that you get enough sleep and that your energy level is ready to go at game time. And also, the Big Ten, they have big stadiums. You know, you got a lot of people in the stands, so you got to have that us against the world mentality and being able to manufacture your own energy. Because when you get out there, there's going to be nobody in that stadium cheering for the Beavers unless somebody's family members really love their kids and went that far. But I'm just saying, like, you got to manufacture your own energy. You got to get your guys pumped up. You can't sleep in too much at the hotel. You got to get up, get your body moving, and get ready to play.
You know, this is the tough thing about being on the West Coast in general. There aren't that many teams for you to pick from out of conference, right? And you want to play someone different every year. They're already playing Boise State later this season. So you got to go back, and until you have some cachet in college football, which Oregon State doesn't have right now, you can't say to Minnesota and other schools in the 10, no, you come here first. Right. They got to go out there. So it is going to be a tough road trip, but they left 2 days early. Gary Anderson said his rule is 2 time zones, and you're leaving an extra day early. So they'll adjust, like you said. It's 6 o'clock at night. Thursday night game, anything can happen. People get hyped. Yeah. I think they'll have a good showing.
There's a lot of schools in Texas that play football too. So I mean, I just, you know, and I get it. I understand why Gary doesn't want to go out there. And we haven't had a whole lot of, like you had mentioned earlier, don't have a whole lot of great history of it. So I'd have no problem just doing the Mountain West Roundup if I was them, which, you know, they're going to play Colorado State next year.
You got to have someone that's going to prep you for the Pac-12, though.
Yeah, I do like playing a tough team. I think we'll know a little bit more going into week 2 what type of Beaver team we have. We go out there, we play tough, we lose a close game. We feel good about that. We go out there and win, I'm going to feel real good about that.
And we're going to talk about the other option.
All right, Beavers fans, in order to get you ready for game day, James headed over to the OSU Beaver store to take a look at some of the new swag they've got going on.
Hey, I'm James Dockery at the OSU Beaver store. We kick off our football season Thursday at Minnesota. What better way to kick off the season than wearing what the coaches and players wear? As you can see, what I have on, the black Oregon State coaches polo. If you like what I'm wearing, you can also get that option here in white. In between these 2 beautiful polos, we have a very popular Nike dry fit. Rumor has it it's flying off the shelves amongst Oregon State student athletes. If you want to be like Coach A even more, Put on this Oregon State Gary Anderson Nike visor, okay? And ladies, we didn't forget about you. As you can see, we have 3 different options for the upcoming season. We have 2 Nike Dry Fit t-shirts, complete with the mesh shoulders to keep you a little cool as the games are still hot early in the season. And when the games start to get nippy and cold outside, we have a brand new Oregon State Beavers Nike hoodie. We have everything here and more at the OSU Beaver store. Fans start here.
And here is another look at the Beavers' upcoming schedule for the season, of course, starting at Minnesota this Thursday, Idaho State, Boise State, before opening up Pac-12 conference play against Colorado. And it's time now for our Wilson Motor Game Ball, and for that we are looking at who we think is going to be the biggest star on offense against Minnesota. Nigel, let's start with you.
Oh, well, I'll start with the guy who used to play quarterback, who then left, came back, wasn't able to play in the spring, then worked himself into good graces in the summer, and then magically by the time the first scrimmage happened, was the most explosive wide receiver they had on the field, and was the one guy, Lindsay, who actually could play the ball in traffic and compete for the football, Seth Collins. So I think this is going to be a huge coming out party for him. As long as he can stay within the framework of some things, I think he's got the it factor for me.
Okay, I think it's got to be Daryl Garrettson, the quarterback. You know, they're going into Minnesota, that, you know, not a powerhouse, but like you said, there's not going to be a lot of Beaver fans there. One thing that Gary Anderson has said repeatedly is that Minnesota is ready for this. They might not be a powerhouse to the rest of us, but they have built, I think their slogan right now is brick by brick or something. So Garrettson's going to come in there, and, you know, he doesn't, what was it you said earlier, you know, just
smooth as silk.
Smooth as silk. He just doesn't panic about anything. And Anderson said, you know, this is why he came to Oregon State, and he can be a calming effect for our younger players who are in that environment for the first time.
Yeah, for me, I had the passing game on there. I'm going to go with the receivers, Jordan Villeman and Victor Bolden, Hunter Jarman, all those guys. I'm just going to take my money on Pac-12 receivers against Big Ten DBs. You could say I'm conference biased. I probably am. But again, I'd love to see JV in the red zone against any Big Ten DB. I'd love to see Victor Bolden out in space showing that West Coast speed. And again, the Oregon State passing game against the Big Ten defense. I'd like to see what happens on Thursday.
One thing off that, Anderson said, got to be multiple this game. Don't have to out-scheme people constantly. Got to be multiple, got to give people multiple things to practice for.
And that's the beauty of Pac-12 football. There's not a whole lot of teams, even when you're lined up against Stanford, everybody wants to talk about their power run game. But truth be told, you're going to deal with 11 personnel, 12 personnel. Sometimes you're going to have 7 offensive linemen on the field. Right. Sometimes, so you've got to be able to adjust for all that. We're a lot of Big 12 football, and when I say 12 personnel, I mean 1 running back, 2 tight ends. The Big 10 football is just not designed that way, which is why Ohio State was so popular and did so well, because they actually brought a West Coast philosophy to that conference. So, you know, I think you're absolutely right. Their ability to stay multiple, keep Minnesota, their defense off balance, could be a huge key for the Beavers.
All right. What are you most looking forward to, Lindsay, Thursday versus Minnesota?
Watching teams that I know something about. You know, Cal in Hawaii, I can't say that I knew a ton about them, and no one can play defense for either of them, so.
Hey, Beaver Nation is starting the season off 1-0, baby. Let's go.
I'll tell you what, if they pull this game off and you look at the rest of the schedule, starting with Colorado and Cal, this could be a big surprise.
It could be 4-0.
Yeah, it could be a big surprise for this team.
All right, Beavers fans, they like to hear that. Much more action coming up tomorrow. We've got #Beavers tomorrow night at 7 p.m., followed by Inside the Huddle with Gary Anderson. Have a great night.
Go Beavs.